The night was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow the moonlight before it could even touch the ground, and Samuel Greaves was having trouble sleeping. His small cabin on the edge of the Oregon forest was usually peaceful, the rhythmic chorus of crickets and the distant rush of the river soothing him into slumber, but tonight there was an unease in the air, something he couldn't explain. He tossed and turned on his creaky bed, until a sharp metallic sound echoed through the night, making his eyes snap open. It wasn't the usual call of an owl or the crack of a branch beneath a wandering deer. No, this was different, unnatural, almost mechanical. Heart-pounding, Samuel grabbed the flashlight from his nightstand and slipped into his boots, pulling on a worn flannel shirt as he stepped outside. The air was icy cold, his breath misting in front of him, and a strange acrid smell hung in the atmosphere, like burnt metal mixed with ozone. The smell grew stronger as he walked toward the clearing behind his cabin, where he often chopped wood during the day. That was when he saw it, a faint pulsating blue glow shimmering through the fog. His first thought was that someone had set up a campfire with odd-colored flames, but as he approached, the truth became terrifyingly clear. In the center of the clearing lay a massive, twisted piece of metal unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was partially embedded in the ground, smoke rising from the gashes in its surface. Wires and panels jutted out at impossible angles, sparking intermittently. It looked like a wreckage, maybe a plane crash, but far too advanced and far too small to be any human aircraft. Samuel's mind raced. Could it be a drone? Some secret military experiment? He reached out a trembling hand to touch the smooth alien surface when he heard it, a soft, ragged gasp followed by a faint, high-pitched voice speaking words he didn't understand. He froze, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the wreckage until it landed on something that made his blood run cold. Half buried beneath a metallic panel was a figure, humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin shimmered faintly, a pale silver-blue color, and her limbs were long and graceful. Strange markings like glowing tattoos ran along her arms and neck. Her eyes fluttered open as she struggled to breathe, her lips forming broken syllables. Samuel stumbled back, heart hammering. "Oh my God," he whispered, but then he heard her say in a trembling, barely audible voice, "I can't breathe." The words were in perfect English now, desperate and terrified. Every instinct told him to run, to flee back to his cabin, lock the doors, and pretend none of this was happening. But another, deeper instinct, the same one that had pushed him to become a volunteer firefighter before he retired, made him lunge forward instead. He shoved the twisted metal aside with all his strength, clearing it from her fragile-looking chest. She gasped again, her entire body convulsing as if air was a foreign concept to her. Samuel dropped to his knees beside her, trying to calm himself. Hey, it's okay," he said, though he wasn't sure if she understood. "Just breathe. You're safe now." Her strange, glowing eyes met his, wide with fear, and for a moment he felt a jolt of connection so profound it almost knocked the breath out of him. He quickly scanned her body. She was covered by a thin, metallic-looking sheet, almost like a survival blanket, but beneath it he could see that her skin was torn in several places, oozing a dark, iridescent fluid that smelled faintly of copper and flowers. Samuel didn't know what to do. This was beyond anything he'd ever encountered. But he knew one thing: she needed to be moved somewhere safe. Gathering his courage, he carefully lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than she looked, almost weightless, and as he carried her back to his cabin, she clung weakly to his shirt, murmuring words he couldn't understand. By the time he reached his home, his muscles were burning, not from her weight but from pure adrenaline. He kicked the door shut behind him and laid her gently on his couch. "Hang on, just hang on," he muttered, grabbing a blanket and covering her. She shivered violently, her breathing shallow and erratic. Samuel ran to the kitchen, filling a bowl with warm water and grabbing clean towels. He knelt beside her and began cleaning the strange wounds as best he could, though every time the towel touched her skin, she hissed in pain. I'm sorry," he said, but continued working. After several tense minutes, her breathing steadied slightly, though her eyes still darted around the room in panic. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached up and clutched his wrist. "Please," she whispered, her voice more coherent now. "Do not let them find me." Samuel froze. Them? Who's them? But she only shook her head weakly, tears glistening in her strange eyes. He swallowed hard, glancing toward the window. Outside, the forest seemed too quiet, as if holding its breath. A deep, low hum vibrated through the air, so faint he thought he might be imagining it. Then he remembered the strange acrid smell, the metallic taste on his tongue. Someone, or something, might already be looking for her. His thoughts raced. If she was an alien, then there were probably others. And if the military caught wind of this, Samuel didn't know who would arrive first, but either way she was in danger. "You need to rest," he said firmly, though his own voice trembled. "I'll keep you safe, I promise." She stared at him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine, as if she was looking not just at him but into him. Finally she nodded, her body relaxing slightly. Exhausted, she drifted into a restless sleep. Samuel sat back on his heels, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. His mind was a whirlwind. What the hell had he gotten himself into? He needed to think, to plan. But before he could, a sharp, rhythmic tapping sounded at the window. He leapt to his feet, heart thundering. The tapping came again, louder this time, followed by a strange, guttural clicking noise that made his stomach twist. He grabbed the shotgun from above the fireplace, creeping toward the window. Peering through the curtain, he saw nothing but fog and darkness. Then, just as he started to relax, a tall, shadowy figure glided past, its movements smooth and unnatural. Samuel's breath caught. There was no way that thing was human. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay quiet. Whoever, or whatever, was outside, they were hunting for the alien woman. And if they found her, he had no doubt they would kill both of them. He backed away slowly, checking on the woman. She was still asleep, though her face was twisted in pain as if she sensed the danger too. Samuel's mind raced. He couldn't stay here. His cabin was too isolated, too easy to trap. He needed to get her somewhere safe, maybe to his old friend Marcus in town. Marcus was an EMT and owed him a few favors. But how could he move her without being seen? The low hum outside grew louder, vibrating the very walls of the cabin. Samuel tightened his grip on the shotgun, his jaw set. He didn't know what was happening or who these creatures were, but he knew one thing for certain. He would fight to protect her, even if it meant risking his own life. Suddenly, the woman bolted upright, her glowing eyes wide with terror. "They are here," she cried, her voice echoing unnaturally in the small room. Before Samuel could react, the door exploded inward, shards of wood flying everywhere. A towering figure stepped through the smoke, its silhouette monstrous against the moonlight. It let out a guttural roar, its clawed hands reaching for the couch where the woman sat. Samuel didn't think. He fired the shotgun, the blast deafening in the enclosed space. The creature staggered back with a screech, ichor spraying from the wound. Samuel grabbed the woman's hand. "We have to go. Now." She stumbled to her feet, still weak, but together they sprinted through the back door and into the forest. Branches whipped against Samuel's face as they ran, the alien woman's strange, glowing markings casting eerie light on the trees around them. Behind them, the guttural roars grew louder, joined by more voices. They were being hunted, and Samuel had no idea how far the enemy would go to reclaim her, or how deep the nightmare would go before it ended. Samuel's lungs burned as he sprinted through the forest, dragging the alien woman by the hand as if his life depended on it, because at that moment, it did. The forest was pitch black except for the eerie glow of her skin, the bioluminescent markings streaking across her arms and neck casting an otherworldly light on the trees rushing past them. Behind them, guttural roars shattered the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy, inhuman footsteps pounding the ground in pursuit. Branches clawed at Samuel's face and arms, thorns tearing through his shirt, but he didn't dare slow down. His only focus was putting as much distance as possible between them and the creature that had smashed through his cabin door. The woman stumbled, her breathing ragged and shallow. Samuel caught her just before she fell, scooping her into his arms without breaking stride. She was incredibly light, almost weightless, but her skin was burning hot to the touch, her body trembling violently as if she were feverish. "Hold on," he panted, his voice a mix of desperation and determination. "We're going to make it. I swear." Her wide, glowing eyes locked on his, and though she said nothing, he felt her silent plea to keep running. A deafening screech tore through the night behind them, so loud it rattled Samuel's bones. He didn't dare look back. He burst through a thicket of underbrush and into a narrow deer path, his boots pounding the dirt. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered this trail leading to an old ranger station about 2 miles east. If they could reach it, maybe they could find a vehicle or a radio to call for help. Assuming help was even possible against whatever those things were. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flash of blue light that lit up the forest like a lightning strike. Samuel glanced back just in time to see another monstrous figure leaping between the trees, moving with terrifying speed and agility. It was gaining on them fast. "Damn it!" Samuel growled through gritted teeth. He veered sharply off the path, plunging into thicker vegetation in the hope of throwing their pursuers off. The alien woman whimpered softly, clutching at his shirt, but didn't resist. Behind them, the guttural roars intensified, now joined by strange clicking noises that echoed through the night like some kind of unholy communication. Samuel's pulse hammered in his ears. He had no idea how many of them there were, only that they were closing in. The forest seemed endless, a maze of darkness and shadows conspiring to slow him down. Just when he thought his legs would give out, he spotted the faint outline of a rocky outcrop ahead. He scrambled up the slope, boots slipping on loose stones, and ducked into a narrow crevice between two boulders. It was barely wide enough to fit them both, but it would have to do. Samuel crouched low, pressing the woman gently against the cool rock. "Stay quiet," he whispered urgently, his finger to his lips. She nodded weakly, her strange, glowing eyes dimming as she tried to control her labored breathing. Samuel peeked through a crack in the rocks, his heart hammering. Moments later, a massive shadow moved through the trees below. The creature was taller than any human, its elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws that glinted in the faint light. Its head was angular and insect-like, with multiple glowing red eyes scanning the forest. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. The thing paused, sniffing the air, then let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated the ground beneath them. Samuel clamped a hand over the alien woman's mouth as her body trembled in terror. The creature prowled closer, its movements disturbingly silent for something so large. It stopped directly in front of their hiding place, its head swiveling unnaturally as it sniffed again. Samuel's entire body went rigid, every muscle screaming at him to stay perfectly still. He could feel the woman's rapid heartbeat through his hand, her skin fever-hot against his palm. The creature let out a sharp clicking noise, answered almost immediately by another from deeper in the forest. Then, to Samuel's immense relief, it turned and bounded away, disappearing into the darkness. Samuel waited several agonizing minutes before daring to breathe again. When he finally removed his hand, the woman gasped softly, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "We can't stay here," Samuel murmured, his voice barely audible. "They'll come back, and probably with more of them." She nodded weakly, then whispered something in a language he didn't understand. Her voice was melodic but urgent, and though the words were foreign, the fear in her tone was unmistakable. Samuel wished he could understand her, but there was no time for that now. He helped her to her feet and they resumed their flight through the forest, moving as quietly as possible. As they ran, Samuel's mind whirled with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why were those creatures hunting her so relentlessly? He glanced at her glowing markings, which pulsed faintly like veins of light beneath her skin. Whatever she was, she clearly didn't belong on Earth. That wreckage he'd found in the clearing, it had to have been her ship. Which meant those monsters were likely from the same place. A sickening thought struck him. What if they weren't just hunting her? What if they were here to stay? They reached a small stream and Samuel paused to let her drink. She knelt by the water's edge, cupping it in her delicate hands, while he scanned their surroundings. The forest was eerily silent now, the earlier roars replaced by an oppressive stillness. It felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. "We need to keep moving," he urged, helping her up again. "There's an old ranger station not far from here. We might find shelter there." She tilted her head, clearly not understanding the words but sensing his intent. They pressed on, the faint glow of dawn beginning to seep through the trees. Samuel's body ached with exhaustion, but he forced himself to keep going. Just when he began to think they might actually make it, a chilling sound shattered the morning air, a high-pitched screech followed by the unmistakable thud of something massive landing nearby. Samuel spun around just in time to see one of the creatures drop from the treetops like a nightmare come to life. It landed in a crouch, its glowing red eyes locking on them. Samuel raised his shotgun and fired without hesitation. The blast hit the creature square in the chest, sending it reeling backward with an unearthly shriek. But to his horror, it didn't go down. Instead, it straightened slowly, the wound already beginning to close before his eyes. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Samuel muttered, pumping another round into the chamber. The creature lunged at him with terrifying speed. Samuel barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side as its claws tore through the air where his head had been moments before. He scrambled to his feet and fired again, this time aiming for its head. The creature howled, staggering but still didn't fall. "Run!" Samuel shouted to the woman. She hesitated, clearly unwilling to leave him, but he roared, "Go!" Finally, she turned and sprinted toward the ranger station while Samuel continued to fire, backing up as he went. The creature pursued relentlessly, its movements unnervingly precise as if it were toying with him. Samuel's shotgun clicked empty. Cursing, he swung it like a club, smashing the creature across its angular head. It barely flinched. Just as it raised its claws to strike, a blinding flash of blue light erupted from behind Samuel. The creature screeched and staggered, its body smoking. Samuel turned to see the alien woman standing with her hands outstretched, the glowing markings on her skin blazing brighter than ever. Energy crackled between her fingers, and with a cry of pure fury, she unleashed another blast. The creature convulsed, then collapsed in a smoking heap. Samuel gaped, breathing hard. "Remind me never to piss you off," he muttered. She stumbled, clearly drained by the effort. Samuel caught her before she fell. "Come on," he said urgently. "We need to get out of here before more of them show up." They reached the ranger station just as the sun began to rise. The building was old and weathered but still standing. Samuel kicked the door open and ushered her inside, quickly barricading it with whatever furniture he could find. Once they were secure, he sank to the floor, utterly exhausted. The woman knelt beside him, placing a hand on his chest. Her touch was warm, comforting. She spoke softly in her language, then, to Samuel's astonishment, added in halting English, "Thank you." Samuel stared at her, stunned. You can speak English?" She nodded weakly. "Learning, fast." Her glowing eyes filled with sorrow. "My name? Eris. Not safe. Not safe." Samuel swallowed hard. "Eris, what are those things? Why are they after you?" Eris's expression darkened. "Hunters," she said simply. "They come for me. They take me your world, and..." A chill ran down Samuel's spine. "And? What do you mean, end?" But before she could answer, a loud, guttural roar echoed outside, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps closing in on the station. Eris's eyes widened in terror. "They found us." Samuel grabbed his shotgun even though he knew it would be useless. "Then we fight," he said grimly, bracing himself as the walls began to shake under the force of the approaching monsters. Samuel's grip tightened on the shotgun even though deep down he knew it wouldn't do much good against the creatures outside. His pulse thudded in his ears as the guttural roars grew louder, accompanied by a rhythmic pounding that shook the fragile walls of the ranger station. Dust rained down from the rafters, and the old wooden boards creaked and groaned as though the entire structure were protesting against the force battering it. Eris crouched beside him, her glowing skin casting an eerie light across the room. Her markings flickered like dying embers, betraying her exhaustion, but there was a fierce determination in her strange, luminescent eyes. Samuel looked at her and saw both fear and strength, a paradox that filled him with a sudden, protective rage. "How many of them are out there?" he hissed. Eris tilted her head slightly, closing her eyes as if listening to something beyond his comprehension. When she opened them again, her expression was grim. "4. Samuel's stomach dropped. One had nearly killed him before, now there were 4. "Great," he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm he didn't feel. "Guess they brought the whole damn welcoming committee." Eris placed a hand on his chest, shaking her head. "Not fight, run." "Run where?" Samuel snapped, frustration spilling over. "They're faster than us, stronger than us, and this place is surrounded by miles of forest. We won't make it 5 steps before they tear us apart." Eris's eyes glowed brighter as she leaned closer, her voice urgent. "There is a place, safe, far but hidden. I can take you." Samuel wanted to demand more answers, but there was no time. The wall to their left exploded inward with a deafening crash, shards of wood and splinters flying like deadly projectiles. Samuel threw himself over Eris, shielding her as debris rained down. When the dust cleared, one of the hunters stood in the gaping hole it had created, its angular head twisting unnaturally as its glowing red eyes locked onto them. It let out a screech that made Samuel's blood run cold. He fired the shotgun reflexively. The blast hit the creature square in the chest, staggering it but not stopping it. It roared, lunging forward. Samuel grabbed Eris's arm and yanked her toward the back door. "Move." They sprinted through the narrow hallway, the creature's claws tearing through the walls behind them like paper. Samuel kicked open the back door, and they tumbled outside into the blinding morning light. The forest stretched endlessly before them, mist curling around the trees. Eris stumbled, clearly weakened, but Samuel hauled her upright. "Where's this safe place?" he demanded, breathless. She pointed to the east, her arm trembling. "That way." Samuel didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand and they took off, their feet pounding the forest floor. Behind them, the guttural roars multiplied as the other hunters joined the chase. Samuel risked a glance over his shoulder and immediately wished he hadn't. The creatures moved with terrifying speed and precision, leaping from tree to tree like monstrous shadows. Their red eyes burned through the mist, and their clicking language filled the air like a chorus of nightmares. Samuel pushed himself harder, ignoring the fire in his lungs and legs. Eris stumbled again, and he scooped her into his arms without breaking stride. She was frighteningly light, as if her body was made of something other than flesh and bone. "Stay with me," he shouted. "Don't you dare pass out now." She clutched his shirt weakly, whispering something in her own language. He didn't understand the words, but the tone was one of desperation. A sudden hiss split the air, followed by a searing pain in Samuel's shoulder. He screamed, nearly dropping Eris. An energy projectile had grazed him, burning through his shirt and skin. He staggered but kept running. The hunters were armed now, and their aim was deadly accurate. "We can't outrun them," Samuel gasped. Eris lifted her head weakly, her markings flaring with sudden intensity. I help." Before Samuel could ask what she meant, a wave of energy pulsed outward from her body, sending a shockwave through the forest. Trees shuddered and leaves burst into the air like confetti. Behind them, the hunters screeched in pain, momentarily thrown off balance. "Go!" Eris cried. Samuel didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted faster than he ever thought possible, adrenaline surging through his veins. They burst into a clearing where a massive rock formation rose like a natural fortress. Eris pointed toward a narrow fissure at its base. "There." Samuel squeezed through the gap, dragging Eris behind him. Inside, the space opened into a hidden cavern, cool and dimly lit by faintly glowing crystals embedded in the walls. Samuel collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. His shoulder throbbed with searing pain, but they were alive. For now. Eris sank to the ground beside him, her breathing ragged. Samuel turned to her, his voice rough with exhaustion. "What the hell were those things? And don't just say hunters. I need answers, Eris." She looked at him with sorrow in her glowing eyes. My people's enemy. Long war. They destroy worlds." Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air of the cavern. "Worlds? You mean planets, don't you?" Eris nodded slowly. "They want me because I carry key." She placed a trembling hand over her chest. Samuel stared at her, confusion and dread swirling in his mind. "Key to what?" "To end them," she whispered. "But if they take me, they will use it to conquer." Samuel rubbed his face with his free hand, trying to process the enormity of what she was saying. "So, let me get this straight. These things aren't just after you because they want to kill you. They need you for some kind of universal doomsday weapon?" Eris's eyes darkened. "Yes." Samuel let out a harsh laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Fantastic. Just fantastic. I was having a normal night, and now I'm in the middle of a damn intergalactic war." Eris reached out and touched his injured shoulder. A warm, tingling sensation spread through his body, dulling the pain. Samuel gasped as the wound began to close before his eyes. "Holy, how did you do that?" She offered a faint smile. "My gift. Healing, limited. Cannot fix everything." Samuel flexed his shoulder, astonished. "Well, that's one hell of a gift." His moment of awe was cut short by a distant roar echoing through the cavern. Samuel's head snapped up. "They're coming, aren't they?" Eris's expression was grim. "They will never stop." Samuel scrambled to his feet, scanning the cavern for exits. "Then we need to keep moving. You said there's a safe place. Where is it exactly?" Eris pointed deeper into the cavern. "Hidden path. Leads to Old Gate. From there, we travel far." Samuel didn't like the sound of Old Gate, but he didn't have a better plan. "Fine. Let's move before those things catch up." They followed the winding tunnel, the glowing crystals providing just enough light to see. The air grew colder and damper, and the walls narrowed until Samuel had to squeeze through sideways. Eris moved with surprising grace despite her injuries, as if she knew this place well. As they descended deeper, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Suddenly, a low clicking sound echoed from behind them. Samuel froze. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," he whispered. Eris's face was pale. "They found us." Before Samuel could react, a massive clawed hand burst through the wall beside him, narrowly missing his head. He stumbled back as one of the hunters smashed through the rock like it was paper. Its glowing red eyes burned with fury as it let out a deafening screech. Samuel fired the shotgun point blank, the blast echoing painfully in the confined space. The creature reeled but didn't fall. More clicking noises filled the tunnel, growing louder. Samuel realized with dawning horror that they were surrounded. "Go," he shouted to Eris. "Find the path. I'll hold them off." "No," Eris cried, grabbing his arm. "You come too." Another hunter burst through the wall on the other side, cutting off their retreat. Samuel swore loudly. "Change of plans, run." They bolted deeper into the tunnel as the creatures closed in. Samuel fired blindly over his shoulder, the blast slowing the hunters but not stopping them. The tunnel twisted and turned, until finally they emerged into a vast underground chamber. In the center stood an ancient structure, its surface covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in Eris's presence. Samuel gaped. "What the hell is that?" Eris's eyes filled with awe and fear. "The gate." Before Samuel could ask what she meant, the hunters poured into the chamber, their screeches echoing like a chorus of nightmares. Eris turned to Samuel, her voice urgent. "Protect me. I must open it." Samuel raised his shotgun, his jaw set. "Do it fast." While Eris knelt by the structure, her glowing hands tracing the symbols, Samuel stood between her and the approaching hunters. He fired until the shotgun clicked empty, then wielded it like a club. The creatures were relentless, their claws slashing, their roars deafening. Just when Samuel thought they were done for, a blinding light erupted from the gate. The hunters screeched in agony, recoiling. Eris rose to her feet, her markings blazing brighter than ever. "Come," she shouted, grabbing Samuel's hand. Together they leapt into the light as the hunters lunged forward, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of color and sound. Samuel's body felt like it was being torn apart and reassembled 1,000 times over as he and Eris plunged through the blinding light of the gate. His vision fractured into shards of color, his ears filled with a deafening roar that wasn't quite sound. He tried to scream but no voice came out, his mouth opening into an endless void as if he had no body at all. Then just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Samuel crashed to the ground, the impact driving the breath from his lungs. He lay there for several seconds, dazed and gasping, trying to remember how to breathe. The air here was thick and strange, carrying a metallic tang that made his tongue sting. Slowly he pushed himself up and looked around. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. They were no longer in the cavern beneath the forest. They stood on the edge of a vast alien landscape beneath a sky the color of burning copper. Towering spires of black stone jutted from the ground at impossible angles, some floating weightlessly in midair. Rivers of glowing blue liquid snaked between jagged cliffs, casting an eerie light over the terrain. In the distance, massive creatures with translucent wings soared through the haze, their cries echoing like mournful horns. Samuel's breath caught. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Where the hell are we?" Eris stood beside him, her glowing markings pulsing faintly as she scanned the horizon. Though she looked just as exhausted as before, there was also a sense of relief in her expression, as if they had reached a place she recognized. "Not hell," she said softly, her English clearer now. "This is my world." Samuel turned to her in shock. "Your world? You mean we're not even on Earth anymore?" She nodded solemnly. "The gate, it moves between places. I brought us here to hide." Samuel's head spun. Less than 24 hours ago, he'd been a simple man living in a cabin in Oregon. Now he was standing on an alien planet, running from nightmarish creatures that wanted to destroy not just him, but possibly his entire species. He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I must be losing my mind." Eris touched his arm gently, her glowing fingers warm against his skin. "You are strong," she said with quiet conviction. "You saved me. You are not mad." Samuel met her strange, luminous gaze and felt a surge of determination. Whatever insanity this was, it was real and he had no choice but to face it. "All right," he said, squaring his shoulders. "What now? Those things are still after us, right? They didn't just give up because we jumped through some magic portal." Eris's expression darkened. "The hunters will come. Always." She gestured toward the horizon where the black spires pierced the sky. "But there is a sanctuary hidden in the mountains. If we reach it, they cannot follow." Samuel scanned the treacherous landscape. "How far?" 2 days' travel, if we move quickly," she replied. Samuel sighed. "Figures. It's never easy." They set off across the alien terrain, Eris leading the way with a sure-footedness that belied her weakened state. Samuel followed close behind, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. The ground was uneven and sometimes seemed to ripple beneath their feet as though alive. Strange plants with bioluminescent leaves pulsed softly in the shadows, and small insect-like creatures scurried away as they passed. Despite the danger, Samuel couldn't help but marvel at the sheer otherworldly beauty around him. At one point they crossed a bridge made of what looked like solid light, suspended over a chasm filled with swirling mist. Samuel's knees nearly buckled as he glanced down, his stomach lurching. "I hate this," he muttered through clenched teeth. Eris glanced back at him with a faint, amused smile. "You brave," she said. Samuel snorted. "Brave?" More like terrified. Her smile faded as her glowing eyes scanned the sky. "Fear keeps you alive." They pressed on, pausing only briefly to rest and drink from the glowing rivers, which Eris assured him were safe. Samuel's mind buzzed with questions he hadn't dared ask before. As they sat in the shadow of a towering spire, he finally voiced one. "Eris, back at the ranger station you said if the hunters take you, it would mean the end of my world. What did you mean by that?" Eris's expression grew pained. "The key I carry, it is called the core. My people created it long ago to protect life. It can destroy the hunters, forever." Samuel frowned. "Sounds like a good thing. Why not use it?" "Because," she said, her voice trembling, "if it is misused it does the opposite. It gives the hunters power to control and consume all worlds. They would spread like fire until nothing remains." Samuel's stomach turned cold. "And they need you to activate it?" Eris nodded. "Only one of my bloodline can unlock the core. That is why they hunt me." Samuel let out a bitter laugh. "So basically you're the galaxy's most wanted woman." Eris tilted her head, confused by the idiom, but her sad smile said she understood enough. Samuel rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay. Then we keep you safe no matter what. If those things want you they'll have to go through me." Her eyes softened. "You would risk so much, for me?" Samuel shrugged, trying to play it off, though his heart was pounding. "You saved my life back there, remember? Guess we're even." A distant screech cut through their moment, freezing them both. Eris leapt to her feet, her markings flaring. "They are near." Samuel cursed under his breath. "Already? We've barely been here a few hours." They took off running, weaving between the jagged spires. The terrain was treacherous, with sudden drops and unstable ground that shifted beneath their feet. Behind them, the guttural roars and clicking noises grew louder. Samuel risked a glance back and saw dark shapes moving through the mist, their glowing red eyes closing in. "They're gaining on us," he shouted. Eris didn't respond, her focus entirely on navigating the path ahead. Samuel's lungs burned, his legs screaming in protest, but he pushed himself harder. The sanctuary was their only hope. Suddenly the ground ahead of them collapsed with a thunderous crack, revealing a massive fissure. Samuel skidded to a halt, nearly tumbling in. The chasm stretched as far as he could see, a swirling abyss of blue mist far below. "Now what?" he panted. Eris scanned the chasm quickly, then pointed to a series of floating stones that formed a rough, uneven bridge. "We must cross." Samuel stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Are you kidding me? Those things are barely even connected." "Trust," she urged, her glowing eyes fierce. "If we stay we die." Samuel swallowed hard. "Hell with it," he muttered. "Let's go." Eris leapt gracefully to the first stone, landing lightly despite her injuries. Samuel followed, nearly losing his balance as the stone wobbled under his weight. They hopped from one to the next, the gap between them growing wider. Behind them, the hunters reached the edge of the chasm. For a moment, Samuel dared to hope they wouldn't follow. Then one of the creatures leapt, landing on a stone with terrifying precision. "Of course they can jump," Samuel growled. "Because why not?" He pushed himself harder, his body aching as they neared the other side. Just as Eris reached solid ground, Samuel felt the stone beneath him shift violently. He stumbled, arms flailing. One of the hunters landed beside him, its claws swiping dangerously close. Samuel swung the shotgun like a bat, smashing it across the creature's head. It roared, staggering, but another leap landed behind him. "Eris, go," he shouted. "Get to safety." "No," she screamed, her voice filled with anguish. She extended her hands, energy crackling between her fingers. A blast of blue light erupted, striking the stones and sending a shockwave through the entire bridge. The hunters shrieked as they were thrown into the abyss, their screams fading into the mist below. Samuel barely managed to leap to solid ground as the last stone crumbled behind him. He collapsed, panting, while Eris sank to her knees, trembling from the effort. "That," Samuel gasped, "was way too close." Eris gave him a weary but relieved smile. "We're safe. For now." They continued their journey, moving through a narrow canyon as night fell. The alien sky darkened to a deep violet, stars glittering like shards of ice. Strange constellations Samuel didn't recognize filled the heavens, reminding him just how far from home he truly was. As they walked, Eris stumbled suddenly, her strength finally giving out. Samuel caught her before she fell. "Hey, stay with me," he said urgently. Her glowing markings were dimming, flickering like dying embers. I need rest," she whispered. Samuel carried her to a sheltered alcove beneath an overhang. He set her down gently and tried to make her comfortable. "You'll be okay," he said, more to himself than to her. She reached up weakly, her fingers brushing his cheek. "Thank you, Samuel." He froze, startled by the sound of his name on her lips. "Get some sleep," he said softly. "I'll keep watch." As she drifted into an uneasy slumber, Samuel sat with his back to the wall, shotgun across his lap. His mind raced with everything that had happened. The wreckage, the hunters, the core, and the terrifying responsibility now resting on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, those creatures were still hunting them, relentless and merciless. And if Eris was right, the fate of not just her world but his own hung in the balance. Samuel clenched his fists, his jaw set. He didn't know how this would end, but he knew one thing. He would protect Eris with his last breath if he had to. In the distance, a guttural roar echoed through the alien night, a chilling reminder that the hunt was far from over. Samuel jolted awake to a low, vibrating hum that reverberated through the alien ground beneath him. For a split second he forgot where he was. His hand shot instinctively to the shotgun resting across his lap as his eyes darted around the dim alcove. Eris was still curled beside him, her glowing markings faint but steady now, her breathing shallow but even. The hum grew louder, rising in pitch until it sounded almost like a scream carried on the wind. Samuel's stomach sank. That wasn't the wind. He reached out and shook Eris's shoulder. "Eris, wake up. Something's coming." She stirred, her glowing eyes fluttering open. The moment she heard the sound, she shot upright, her expression one of sheer terror. "Hunters," she whispered, the word trembling on her tongue. Samuel swore under his breath. "We didn't lose them after all." Eris shook her head violently, panic in her movements. "No, not hunters. Worse." Samuel's blood ran cold. Worse than the creatures that had chased them across two worlds? "Define worse," he demanded, but there was no time for answers. The canyon walls around them began to shake violently, loose stones tumbling down as the humming turned into a deafening roar. Samuel grabbed Eris and pulled her to her feet. "Move." They bolted from the alcove just as the ground where they had been sitting split apart, a jagged crack racing across the canyon floor. A massive shape burst from the fissure, sending a wave of hot, acrid air blasting outward. Samuel stumbled, barely keeping his grip on Eris as he turned to look, and immediately wished he hadn't. Towering above them was a creature unlike anything he had seen before. Its body was a swirling mass of darkness, like liquid shadow given form, with dozens of glowing eyes scattered across its surface. Jagged appendages whipped around it like tentacles, each tipped with a blade-like claw that gleamed with a sickly green light. The thing let out a roar that rattled Samuel's bones, the sound somehow both physical and mental, echoing directly inside his skull. Eris's face was pale with terror. "A void wraith," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "It guards the sanctuary. We must pass, but it will not let us." Samuel aimed his shotgun instinctively, even though he knew it would probably be useless. "Any chance it's afraid of loud noises?" he muttered, more to steady his own nerves than anything. Eris shook her head, her glowing markings flaring brighter. "Its kind feeds on fear." The creature lunged, its tentacles lashing out like whips. Samuel dove to the side, dragging Eris with him. A claw slammed into the ground where they'd been standing, leaving a smoking crater. "Okay, plan B," Samuel shouted as they scrambled to their feet. "How do we kill it?" Eris hesitated, clearly torn. "There is a core of light deep inside. But to reach it, one must strike true at the very moment it reveals itself." "And let me guess," Samuel panted, dodging another strike, "it doesn't do that very often." The void wraith roared again, and suddenly the air around them became heavy and suffocating. Samuel gasped as a crushing weight pressed down on his chest, making it hard to move or breathe. The creature's many eyes glowed brighter, and Samuel realized with dawning horror that it wasn't just attacking their bodies, it was attacking their minds. Nightmarish visions flashed through his head. His cabin burning, his sister's face twisted in pain, the forest drenched in blood. "No," he growled, clutching his head. Get out of my mind. Eris staggered beside him, her own eyes wide with fear. Her markings flickered erratically as she fought to maintain control. Samuel, she gasped. You must not give in. If you fall to fear, it will consume you. Samuel grit his teeth, focusing on her voice, on the feel of her hand clutching his. Slowly, painfully he pushed the visions aside. Right, he said through clenched teeth. We fight back. He scanned the battlefield, searching for anything they could use. His gaze fell on a cluster of the glowing blue river streams snaking through the canyon. They bubbled and hissed like boiling acid. That stuff's dangerous, right? He shouted to Eris. She nodded weakly. Very. It burns even the hunters. Samuel's mind raced. Then let's make the big ugly take a swim. He fired a shot at the creature's closest tentacle. The slug barely scratched it, but it got the monster's attention. Hey, over here, you overgrown nightmare, he yelled, waving his arms. The void wraith turned its many eyes toward him and let out a guttural screech. Samuel ran, leading it toward the glowing river. Eris, understanding his plan, began to chant in her native tongue, her markings blazing like a beacon. She raised her hands, and a barrier of shimmering light appeared between Samuel and the creature, funneling it toward the riverbank. The void wraith thrashed, furious, but it followed the path Samuel had created. At the last moment, Samuel dove aside, rolling across the uneven ground. The creature barreled forward, its momentum carrying it over the edge. With an ear-splitting roar, it plunged into the glowing river. Steam exploded upward as its form began to dissolve, the acidic water eating through its shadowy body. For a heartbeat, Samuel dared to hope it was over. Then the creature's core, an orb of blinding white light, rose from the dissolving mass. Eris shouted, Now, Samuel. Strike now. Samuel didn't hesitate. He raised the shotgun, aimed and fired. The slug hit the glowing core dead center. There was a blinding flash, followed by a shockwave that sent Samuel tumbling backward. When he blinked the spots from his eyes, the creature was gone. Only a faint shimmer in the air remained where it had been. Samuel staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. Please tell me that was the only one. Eris joined him, her expression grim. The only one here, she said. But others may come. Samuel groaned. Figures. They didn't have time to rest. The sanctuary was close now, Eris could feel it. They pressed on, climbing a steep, jagged path that wound up the side of a massive mountain. As they ascended, the air grew colder, and strange lights flickered in the mist around them. Samuel's breath puffed out in white clouds, his muscles screaming with exhaustion. This place better be worth it, he muttered. Eris gave him a small, encouraging smile. It will be. The sanctuary is my people's last refuge. At last they reached the summit. Samuel froze, awestruck. Before them stood an enormous structure carved directly into the mountain's peak. It resembled a cathedral crossed with a fortress, its spires reaching into the alien sky. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its walls, pulsing like a heartbeat. Massive doors of black stone stood closed, flanked by statues of winged beings that looked eerily like Eris. Samuel let out a low whistle. I've seen a lot of weird stuff lately, but this takes the cake. Eris approached the doors reverently, her hands glowing as she pressed them to the surface. The symbols flared brighter, and with a deep rumble, the doors slowly swung open. Inside, the sanctuary was breathtaking. A vast chamber stretched before them, lit by floating orbs of light that drifted lazily through the air. Pillars of crystal rose from the floor, each one humming softly. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform with a pedestal. Upon the pedestal rested a small, intricately carved device glowing faintly, the core. Eris fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. We made it, she whispered. Samuel approached cautiously, his eyes on the strange artifact. That's it? The thing everyone's trying to kill us for? Eris nodded, reverence in her gaze. With this, we can end the hunter's reign forever. Before Samuel could reply, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. He spun, shotgun ready. The massive doors had been blown inward, and through the opening poured a swarm of hunters, their red eyes blazing. Leading them was a figure unlike the others, a towering creature clad in dark armor, its face obscured by a mask of bone. Eris gasped. The High Hunter. Samuel's heart pounded. Oh, fantastic. A boss fight. The High Hunter raised its clawed hand, and the other creatures fanned out, surrounding them. Give me the core, it hissed in a guttural, chilling voice that somehow spoke perfect English. And I will make your deaths swift. Samuel stepped in front of Eris, leveling his shotgun. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pass on that. The High Hunter tilted its head as if amused. Foolish human. You cannot stop what is coming. It lunged, moving with terrifying speed. Samuel fired point blank, the blast staggering it but not stopping it. Eris cried out, summoning a shield of light to block the other hunters. Samuel, take the core, she shouted. Samuel hesitated. What? I don't even know how to use it. Just take it, she screamed. With no other choice, Samuel sprinted to the pedestal and grabbed the core. The moment his fingers touched it, searing energy surged through his body. Visions flooded his mind, images of countless worlds, of battles fought and lost, of the hunters consuming entire civilizations. Samuel screamed, his body racked with pain, but he held on. Somewhere in the chaos, he heard Eris's voice. You must focus. The core responds to will. To protect, to destroy, it is your choice. Samuel clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus on one thing. Protecting Eris, protecting Earth, protecting everything that mattered. The core blazed with light, and Samuel felt power like nothing he'd ever known. The hunters shrieked, recoiling. Even the High Hunter faltered. Samuel turned the energy outward, unleashing a wave of pure force that blasted the creatures back. The entire sanctuary shook, crystal pillars shattering as the light grew blinding. When it finally faded, the hunters were gone, reduced to nothing but ash. Samuel collapsed, the core slipping from his hand. Eris rushed to his side, her glowing markings bright with relief. You did it, she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Samuel struggled to sit up, his body trembling. Don't celebrate yet, he panted. I think they'll be back. Eris shook her head. Not the hunters. Not anymore. She held up the core, which now pulsed gently instead of violently. Their link is severed. You have saved both our worlds. Samuel let out a shaky laugh. Great. Does that mean I can finally go home? Eris's smile was bittersweet. Yes, but I will miss you. Samuel looked into her luminous eyes, his chest tightening. Yeah, he said softly. Me too. Before he could say more, the sanctuary trembled again, but this time, it wasn't from the hunters. A new light filled the chamber, warm and golden. A portal opened, revealing a view of Samuel's forest back on Earth. Eris touched his hand gently. Go. Your world needs you. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. Take care of yourself, Eris. With one last, lingering look, he stepped through the portal. As he emerged back in the familiar forest, Samuel stumbled and fell to his knees. Behind him, the portal closed with a final flash of light. He stared at the quiet trees, his mind reeling. Had it all really happened? In his hand, he still clutched a fragment of the core, a small, glowing shard. Samuel smiled grimly. Yeah, he muttered to himself. It happened. And as the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Samuel rose, ready to face whatever came next, knowing he had already faced the darkness and won. Samuel stood in the clearing, his breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps as the cool morning air of his own world filled his lungs. The familiar scent of damp earth and pine needles wrapped around him, grounding him in the present, yet his mind still swam with the echoes of everything that had just happened. The glowing shard of the core pulsed softly in his palm, a tiny piece of the cosmic power he had just wielded. It felt impossibly heavy for its size, as if it carried the weight of entire worlds. He stared at it for a long moment, then clenched his fist around it, determination hardening his expression. The nightmare wasn't over, not really. The hunters were gone, but the memory of their hunger, their relentless pursuit, would never leave him. And somewhere out there, in the vastness of the universe, other threats might be waiting. Behind him, the portal's fading light shimmered briefly before vanishing entirely, leaving nothing but the quiet rustle of the forest. Samuel turned in a slow circle, taking in the familiar sights of home. The moss-covered rocks, the towering evergreens, the distant sound of rushing water. It should have brought him comfort, but instead he felt like a stranger here. He had crossed galaxies, fought creatures of darkness, and held the fate of two worlds in his hands. How could he ever go back to being just a man in a cabin in the woods? A branch snapped nearby and Samuel's instincts kicked in. He raised the shotgun still slung across his back, his muscles tensing. Who's there? He barked. A moment later, a figure emerged from the trees, a park ranger, wide-eyed and wary. Samuel recognized him as Matt, one of the locals who occasionally stopped by to check on the area. Matt froze when he saw Samuel, his gaze flicking to the strange glowing shard in Samuel's hand. Jesus, Sam, he said, voice trembling. We've been looking for you for days. The whole damn search party thought you were dead. Samuel's mind raced. How long had he been gone? Time on the alien world had felt strange, fluid. Days? He repeated, stunned. Matt nodded. You disappeared after those weird lights were reported near the ranger station. Then the station was, well, it was destroyed. Everyone thought you were caught in the explosion. He took a step closer, his brow furrowing. What the hell happened out there? Samuel considered telling the truth, then immediately dismissed the idea. No one would believe him. And even if they did, the knowledge of the Corps and the hunters could cause panic, or worse, attract more danger. He forced a shaky laugh. I got lost in the storm. Took a bad fall, hit my head. When I woke up, the station was gone and, well, here I am. It was a flimsy story, but Matt seemed too relieved to question it. Thank God you're alive, Matt said, clapping Samuel on the shoulder. Come on, let's get you checked out. You look like hell. As they walked back toward civilization, Samuel kept his fist tightly closed around the shard, hiding it from view. His thoughts were a storm of conflicting emotions: relief at being home, grief for the friends and allies he'd lost, longing for Eris and her luminous eyes. The memory of her final words echoed in his mind. Your world needs you. When they reached the edge of town, Samuel was swarmed by concerned locals and emergency personnel. Questions flew at him from all sides, but he gave the same vague answers, deflecting whenever possible. A doctor insisted on examining him, and while Samuel submitted to the checkup, he refused to let go of the shard even for a moment. The glowing crystal seemed to hum faintly, almost like it was alive, and Samuel felt a strange sense of comfort knowing it was with him. Later, alone in a small room provided by the emergency services, Samuel finally had a moment to breathe. He sat on the narrow bed, staring at the shard. Its glow pulsed in time with his heartbeat. What am I supposed to do with you? He muttered. The shard didn't answer, of course, but Samuel felt a subtle warmth radiating from it, as if it understood his words somehow. His thoughts drifted to Eris. He pictured her standing in the sanctuary, her markings glowing brightly, her expression a mix of pride and sorrow as she urged him to go. A lump rose in his throat. He had saved her world, yes, but at the cost of leaving her behind. Would he ever see her again? Or was that chapter of his life truly closed? Before he could sink too deeply into despair, a soft knock came at the door. Samuel tensed, instinctively hiding the shard beneath his pillow. Yeah, he called. The door creaked open and Matt stepped inside carrying a cup of coffee. Brought you this, he said, setting it down on the bedside table. You look like you need it. Samuel managed a faint smile. Thanks. Matt hesitated, then said, Look, Sam. I didn't want to say this in front of everyone, but there've been more reports. Strange lights in the sky, weird sounds coming from the forest at night. Some folks are saying it's aliens. He chuckled nervously, clearly not believing his own words. Crazy, right? Samuel's stomach clenched. Yeah, he said carefully. Crazy. Matt studied him for a moment, his expression serious. Thing is, you've always been the level-headed one around here. If anyone would know what's going on, it's you. So, if there's something we should be worried about, you'd tell me, right? Samuel forced himself to meet Matt's gaze. Of course, he lied smoothly. But there's nothing to worry about. Probably just atmospheric stuff. People's imaginations running wild. Matt didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. All right. Get some rest, man. You've been through a lot. When he left, Samuel let out a long breath. The glowing shard under his pillow seemed to hum louder, as if reacting to his stress. He pulled it out and held it up, staring into its depths. For a brief moment, he thought he saw Eris's face reflected in the glow. His heart ached. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every whisper of wind outside set his nerves on edge. Finally, he got up and slipped out into the cool night air. The town was quiet, most of its residents asleep. Samuel walked to the edge of the forest, the shard glowing softly in his hand. He stood there for a long time, staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Eris was looking at the same sky, or its alien equivalent. Somewhere out there, other worlds were fighting their own battles. Samuel had thought his journey was over when he stepped through the portal, but now he wasn't so sure. The shard felt like a promise, a connection between him and the greater universe. A sudden rustling behind him made Samuel spin around, shotgun ready. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, its form vaguely humanoid but indistinct. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger. Who are you? He demanded. The figure didn't speak. Instead, it raised a hand and pointed at the shard. Samuel's grip tightened protectively. Not a chance, he growled. A low, distorted voice finally emerged. The hunters are gone, but others will come. That shard is a beacon. It calls to them. Samuel's blood ran cold. What do you mean? The figure tilted its head. It is a key and a weapon. If you keep it, they will find you. If you destroy it, you may save this world, but lose all hope of returning to hers. Samuel's heart pounded. Eris, he whispered. The figure stepped closer, its presence radiating an unsettling energy. Choose wisely, Samuel. The fate of two worlds depends on it. Before Samuel could respond, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air where it had stood. Samuel sank to his knees, the shard glowing brightly in his trembling hands. He felt torn in two. Destroying it would mean safety for Earth, but it would also sever his last link to Eris and the world he had fought so hard to save. Keeping it would put his home in danger, but it might one day allow him to return to her. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Samuel made his decision. He stood tall, shoulders squared, determination etched into every line of his face. He would keep the shard, but he wouldn't hide from the danger it attracted. If others were coming, he would be ready. This isn't over, he said aloud, his voice steady. You hear me, Eris? I'll find my way back to you. And if anyone tries to hurt this world or yours, he clenched the shard tightly, its glow flaring in response. I'll stop them. With that vow, Samuel turned and walked back toward the forest, the shard's light casting long, defiant shadows behind him. The story wasn't ending, it was only just beginning. Far above, unseen by human eyes, a ripple spread across the stars, carrying Samuel's defiance into the vast, waiting universe. The end.